Do you want to turn your video off, Tony?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it now. Yeah, I'll lock everything off then.
Good morning and welcome to today's Strong Communities on the 28th of January 2021. Before we continue with today's agenda, I just want to take a moment to announce the sad passing of our dear friend and colleague and Strong Communities member, County Councillor David Dovey. David was a devoted councillor for over 12 years for St King's Mark Ward, who cared deeply for the Chepstow community and his constituents. He was a man of integrity and will be sorely missed by all the Monmouthshire Council family. Our thoughts and prayers are with his loving wife, Steph, and son Spencer at this difficult time, and we will now hold a minute's silence to remember our kind and loving David. Okay, do we have any apologies for absence? I don't think we do. So we'll do declarations of interest as and when. Obviously there's no public forum, so now we'll move on to item 4, the budget monitoring, scrutiny of the budget monitoring capital and revenue position at month 7. Can I hand over to Jot? There we go. Morning.
Good morning, Chair. Yeah, just to introduce myself to members that I don't know, I'm Jonathan Davis, currently the Acting Assistant Head of Finance at Monmouthshire County Council. I'm just going to run through quickly the headline figures from the month 7 revenue and budget capital budget monitoring report. My colleague Dave Loader is also on the call, and he's going to come on shortly as well, just to run through the more salient points for this committee and those pressures and areas that are more relevant. So just to cover off those headline figures that were reported to the 6th of January Cabinet. We forecast on the revenue budget a forecast deficit of 6.43 million, which it's important we split down really in terms of what this year we are allocating to a specific COVID-19 response impact, so those additional costs and income losses that we're incurring this year, which make up around 5.91 million of that reported figure. Since the report was written, we've received a further amount from Welsh Government from their Hardship Fund. So that brings the figure down to around 4.13 million at the time of this meeting. On the non-COVID side, we're currently looking and forecasting a deficit of around 518,000, and that's the amount we're really focusing on, I guess, in terms of operationally, and really trying to come back on. As we move towards the end of the financial year. So the focus is on that, and really looking at cost reduction and immediate steps to curtail some non-essential expenditure where possible, but also minimising the impact on frontline service delivery as they respond to the pandemic. So just touching upon the COVID-related impact, you'll be well aware that we are claiming significant amounts from the Welsh Government Hardship Fund, and we're continuing to have dialogue with Welsh Government around that, and we're certainly in a more confident position that those additional costs and losses are going to be covered for this financial year, and we're certainly looking to have dialogue with them around past the end of this financial year and as we move into to budget setting for next year. I think a key point to note on this, and we're going to come on to the budget item later, but given the extraordinary nature of this year, it's inevitable that there's going to be pressures and services are going to have pressures that we need to take account of as we move into budget setting. And certainly there's been an indirect impact, I guess, of the pandemic, in so much that where services have budgeted to make service efficiencies this year, they perhaps haven't had the resource or time to focus on that when they've been responding to the pandemic and all the pressures that brings. So just finally, in terms of capital, I think perhaps unsurprisingly for members, given the focus and circumstances this year, we are forecasting significant slippage, around 60% of the programme, totalling 37.4 million. But behind the scenes, we're looking to make progress and ensure that as we hopefully go into the recovery phase of the pandemic, we're looking to progress those schemes and get them back on track. So as I say, Chair, Dave's on the call. He's going to run through a few of the areas more relevant to this committee from month 7. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. Good morning, members. As John said, I'm Dave Loader from Central Finance. So I'll just run quickly through some of the main points that fall within this select committee. So you'll note that there's an Appendix 3 in the main reports, which specifically outlines the performance of the services that sit within Strong Communities portfolio. In summary, we are forecasting a £2.184 million overspend on frontline services. Just note that this figure excludes financing and appropriations, but of that 2.184 million, 2.364 million relates to COVID, and we actually have a £180,000 underspend on non-COVID related services. So quickly, COVID related, so the main services that have been impacted by COVID, council tax and benefits, we're seeing a £320,000 overspend on housing benefit subsidy. That is as a result of increased claims, mainly due to housing the homeless in B&Bs, and we're also seeing an £86,000 loss of summons income as court openings have been affected. We've seen a £37,000 shortfall in income in corporate training, as obviously external training courses have been affected by the closure of the centre. Schools catering, we've seen a £409,000 shortfall in paid meal income. Passenger transport, we've got a £259,000 loss on private hire income, and we're also seeing £79,000 increased costs in driver and contract costs. In our transport fleet maintenance department, we're seeing a £66,000 increase in cost because the size of the fleet has increased because of COVID. Waste and grounds maintenance, we're also seeing issues. We're obviously seeing a £292,000 increase in vehicle and staff costs. We've had to incur those costs to adhere to social distancing requirements as a result of COVID, and we're also seeing a £212,000 loss of external income. In our car parking, again, lockdowns have affected pay and display and civil parking enforcement income, and we're actually forecasting a £525,000 shortfall in income in that area. And lastly, land charges, we're actually reporting a £50,000 shortfall in search income. So as John mentioned, we're expecting all of this to be covered by Welsh Government funding. We are submitting claims monthly for the Hardship Fund for expenditure recovery. We're submitting claims quarterly for lost income, and we've also had furlough income for staff that have been on furlough. So then moving on to non-COVID related, as I said, we were looking at about a net £180,000 underspend. Now in the report in Appendix 3 is quite a detailed report, but again the main underspends and overspends I'll just run through briefly. So underspends, we're seeing an underspend in finance division of £234,000. That's because of staff vacancies in central finance and debtors, but we are also seeing some savings in exchequer because of the delays to system development costs. In IT, we're seeing a £431,000 underspend. This can be split between an underspend on our SRS contribution of £122,000, but we're also forecasting a £309,000 saving within our digital programme office. Now that has come about because we've passported staff costs that relate to digital transformation to capital, and that forms part of the capitalisation directive. Within people, we're forecasting £105,000 underspend. Again, that's mainly staff savings within our innovation department, where we're moving staff costs that qualify to be capitalised to the capitalisation directive, and we're also seeing savings in HR, where staff posts have been filled partway through the year. Street lighting, we're seeing a £72,000 underspend. That's predominantly down to reduced energy costs as a result of the energy saving lamps. We're also seeing a small windfall this year as we haven't got to start paying off an element of the loan until next year for that, so we're seeing a little bit of a windfall there. Highways and flooding, a net £123,000 underspend. Again, that's predominantly down to staff vacancy savings, where we've held post vacant to help the overall overspend of the department. And then we're seeing a £210,000 saving in corporate services. That's mainly down to £109,000 receipt that we've received from the dissolution of Capita Gwent, and £101,000 from rate refunds on authority-owned premises. As I said, there are some services that are overspending. Main ones, passenger transport, expecting a non-COVID overspend of £293,000. That's due to staffing pressures and increased costs resulting from contract handbacks. Fleet maintenance, we're reporting £138,000 overspend. That's a mixture of increased depot repair costs and just increase in repair of authority vehicles. Waste services, we're expecting a £350,000 overspend. It's a multitude of things with waste. We've got contract inflation, we've got the delay in the rollout of the polyprop bag scheme, and also delaying the closure of the SCA site. And it's just also the volatility in the recycling market that's pushed costs up. And then within corporate, we're reporting a £215,000 additional pension strain costs, and also £56,000 increase in insurance cost. So as John mentioned, some of the above overspends will be included as budget pressures in the 21-22 MTFP that we will discuss later. Services that fall outside of the net cost of services, just briefly, we're expecting £163,000 underspend in appropriations. That's mainly due to interest payable savings being offset by interest and investment income shortfalls, and we're also seeing a £157,000 underspend in financing. It's mainly due to an improvement in council tax base, which means we're expecting or forecasting to collect £385,000 more of council tax this year, but this has been part offset by an overspend on council tax benefit support of £229,000, although there is a possibility that will be covered off by additional funding from Welsh Government. Just moving on to capital quickly, as John mentioned, we're not forecasting any over or underspends on capital at month 7, but there is a large amount of slippage. I think the authority total was about 37.4 million. Most of that relates to release of schemes outside of this select committee, such as asset investment fund, tranche B, comprehensive, Crick Road Care Home. I think the only scheme that would fall within this portfolio is the IT upgrade and refurbishment of the council chamber, and we're proposing to slip £200,000 forward into next year to complete that scheme. So next steps really for finance. So we're in the process of finalising month 9 reports, which will obviously report to members in due course. As John said, we've got this overall £580,000 non-COVID overspend that needs to be managed. So we are working with managers to ensure all non-essential spend is stopped to help mitigate that. And we are also continuing to work with managers to ensure that all COVID-related costs and loss of income are identified and correctly claimed from Welsh Government. So that's probably a good place to stop. Be happy to field any questions. I'm just looking. I don't think there are any officers on the call today, so I'll try my best to field any queries or questions. If not, I'll have to take them away and come back. Okay, thank you.
Still muted.
Sorry, did you call me then, Chairman? Sorry.
No, 2 secs. Sorry, my microphone was playing up. I think first we've got Linda Guppy, and then yourself, Val, and then Dimitri.
That's right, I picked up now.
Councillor Guppy, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you for that report. I just wanted to ask a question about monies that are going to be reclaimed, specifically with the car parking. I'm not quite sure if I've got a bit of an interest. I'll declare it anyway, but it's non-prejudicial. Roggett Community Council has got a shared car park with the authority. You said about reclaiming money. To date, I'm not quite sure if you've agreed to offer some of that reclaimed money for car parking to the Roggett Community Council for the 7-tunnel car parking. And also, you said something about profits and deficits, but I couldn't find in the report about the solar panels, and have we made any profits this year from that, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Regarding the car parking, we are submitting quarterly claims to Welsh Government regarding income loss for car parks. The way that claim is built up is based on actual activity this year as compared to actual activity last year. So obviously that, what I will have to do, I suppose, is go away and have a word with our car parking manager and discuss the way forward for what we're going to do with Roggett. I can't actually say yes or no on the call. What I'll do, I'll go back to car parks and we'll open up that discussion. Okay. Regarding solar panels, I don't think it actually falls under this select committee, but I'm just recalling the report. We are underspending against the solar farm and the sustainability section, so our income targets are being met. So we are making the required returns on the solar farm and sustainability and the solar panels. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. Did you want to come back in?
No, just that the car park in Roggett has significantly been used less because of people haven't been commuting via the trains, and just if you could just give me an update, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Val Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you clarify for me, please, the position with Capita Gwent? Because I thought we parted company with Capita many years ago. One section we did. So I'm surprised that again, it's still within our remit. So explanation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can come in on that one if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, this has been a long-going situation. You're quite right, Councillor. I think the final kind of steps to actually get the agreement dissolved has taken quite a while, and especially over the last 12 months. So this really is just the kind of final kind of dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's, I guess, and just getting those funds back to the various partners. So you're quite right. The agreement and partnership ended quite a long time ago, but this is just the final administration around it as such.
Just in my mind, a long time ago, was it something like 10 years ago, or it's don't worry, it doesn't matter. It's just that it was a long time ago, and very surprised. And yes, it's rather nice to have some money back. But thank you very much for explanation. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Val. And next is County Councillor Dimitri Petruni.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, I heard around part of the way we're balancing the budget in the areas we've discussed is keeping some positions open, vacancy factor. I'm just wondering how sustainable that is in the long term in terms of providing the services to the standard we expect, to what our residents expect. Surely that's a short-term policy that can't be sustained in the long term. And I just want to have a bit more discussion around that. And also, what is our agency costs or consultant costs in the areas we've discussed as well? So are we, by the fact that we're having to keep vacancy factors quite high, or keep positions open and unfulfilled to help manage the budget, while on the other hand, having to recruit agency or consultants wherever appropriate and necessary to make sure we keep the standard of the service going, I just think doesn't make any sense. I just want a bit of clarification around that, please, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I know Councillor Murphy may want to come in on this one afterwards, but I think just in terms of those vacancies and keeping those open, it's very much specific to the service, and you're quite right, Councillor, in terms of not being sustainable in the long term. But I think this year more than ever, where staff have been diverted to deal with the frontline circumstances and responding to the pandemic. Partly, there hasn't been that resource to really look to fill those vacancies where required. But certainly behind the scenes, we're looking on the horizon towards the recovery phase and really looking at what shape those services need to take at that stage. So we're quite appreciative that those services may look quite different as we come out of the pandemic. The demands on those services, excuse me, may well change, and we need to be prepared, I guess, to shape those services and invest in reforming those to meet the demands of our county. So in terms of agency costs, I obviously don't have a figure for this committee's area on hand, and I can certainly come back on that. But certainly those areas that have been using agency costs have benefited from the flexibility of that, and in a lot of areas, those contracts have been flexible, and we've been able to call on them as required. But there's a real appreciation within the services that isn't sustainable long term. We need to fill those vacancies on a permanent basis to ensure that the long term costs are manageable and not higher than they need to be. So I don't know if Councillor Murphy wanted to come in or whether that covers everything. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'll just add a bit to that, Chair, if I may. Yeah, with the vacancy factor for years now, we've always taken a 2% vacancy factor. It's a way of sharpening up the departments, or at least it was seen as that. It also enables us to assess whether or not a post is actually required. If they've done without it for a substantial time to achieve that 2% saving, it does beg the question as to whether the post should be there in the first place. That was certainly true several years ago. It's certainly not true now. There's a lot of departments at the moment where we've had to accept that the taking a vacancy factor is no longer appropriate, particularly in social care. We've accepted that as an additional pressure the fact that they can't cope with it anymore. Inevitably, that was going to be the case. You can only squeeze so far, and certain departments have been squeezed as far as we possibly can. I think that pretty well covers it, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Of course you can.
Thanks. It sounds like it's going to, out of this crisis, we are going to have a rethink of the restructure of the teams, from what Jonathan was saying. In which case it makes sense, given the pandemic, given the staffing pressures, given we need to reassess our services and what we can deliver in the future. So I look forward to that piece of work. Is that a piece of work we're working on and that this committee will see? And the second question is, I would like to see those agency costs, not just a headline figure, but where, and a breakdown of who will be paid and why. I personally would love that information. I don't know if the committee would or the chair would, but if that could be provided, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petruni. County Councillor Tony Eason.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I go to reference the £72,000 surplus or saving on street lights. I'd like to ask a general question about street lights in particular. Has the rollout of LED lights been completed? And I noticed that a lot of lights are staying on overnight. So I take it that the contract that we had with the firm that supplied the remote switching of the system has now been removed, because I think they're coming to the end of the contract. The other thing is a question of the budget in the future. Considering we making a potential saving or surplus of 72k, will that change your budget for the future of lighting overall? And how will that affect the repayment of the loan from the Welsh government? This is the Welsh government, yes, loan to the Welsh government. And the future of street lighting itself, I think it's an excellent move to go to LED lighting. On the main roads, the lighting is good, but in my ward, some of the streets have got poor lighting. As a consequence, the LED lighting isn't as efficient lighting-wise as opposed to the solar lights or whatever they were called. Is there any plans to look at the lighting facilities across some of the older streets in our wards, Abergavenny, Monmouth, my ward? That's my 5 questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take this one. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Regarding the underspend, that's made up of 2 areas really, probably 3 areas. It's the benefit. We're starting to see the benefit of the LED on the reduction in electricity consumption. So that's helping. We've also benefited from an actual reduction in energy price increase this financial year. We had built in quite a large budgeted increase for this year. Actual energy costs increases didn't come to that level. But again, we're talking about the loan repayment. We're also seeing the benefit that we're seeing the benefit of installing the LEDs and the reduction in energy, but we haven't got to start repaying the loan for some of those LEDs until next year. So regarding the installation, I think we are on target to completely finish this financial year for all the LEDs. So the majority of our inventory will have LED lights in. With us underspending £72,000 this year, it won't impact on the budget next year. We'll carry forward with the same amount of budget we have this year, because obviously next financial year we will have to pay the full amount of the loans, of the annual loan repayments. So we need that or an element of that £72,000 to pay off that loan. Regarding the rollout and some of the LEDs and some a question about the quality of the light on some of your streets, I can't really answer that. I'm afraid that's the question that will have to go to the officer. Have I covered everything?
That was about it. But can I come back on this loan repayment? It's to do that you're running a 72k service. How long have we got to pay that loan off? And will the budget surplus be sufficient to cover that? In other words, we'll be not getting lighting for free, but we'll be able to balance one against the other.
Yeah, so with the loan repayment, I think we're paying them off over 15 years. So obviously the life of the asset will be at least 15 years, and we should see energy efficiencies from that LED light for 15 years. The only problem that we do have is obviously every budget model, we don't increase non-pay budgets by inflation. So the only issue we will have going forward is the cost of energy. So if the cost of energy goes up materially from over the next 5 years, we'll have to build that into our budget as a budget pressure as part of the MTFP to ensure that the street lighting budget is sufficient enough to cover those increases. If that happens, there shouldn't be any issues with savings against loan repayment. We should always be able to cover off the loan repayment.
Lovely, okay. Thank you, Chair. That's fine, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions now on this item? Can't see any other hands up, so we'll move on to item 5, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a set of slides here which I think members would have had in advance, but if you're okay with me bringing them up on the screen, Chair, and I'll run through them briefly in terms of the main points. Bear with me a second. Can I just check that everyone can see those, Chair?
Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you. So, as I said, I'll run through the headline issues in terms of the draft budget proposals for next year. Again, Dave will come in towards the end just to cover off those more relevant items for the committee. In terms of the slide deck here, this is the same slide deck that would have been presented to Cabinet on the 20th of January and is being used for the public consultation, which runs until the 17th of February. I think it's fair to say it's been an unusual year, both in terms of the pandemic, but obviously preparing a budget for next year with the uncertainties and risks that we continue to have in finance. We started out this financial year in terms of some significant pressures coming on stream, both in terms of flooding and then the outbreak of the pandemic in March. So it's put council finances and the resources of the authority under significant pressure. So this budget has had to be slightly different to previous years. We've had to be conscious of those pressures on the frontline services, the support services behind that, and where staff have been diverted to deal with the pandemic. It's unfair, to ask them to make significant savings on their services whilst they're balancing all of that work. So, we are supporting the budget this year with some specific reserve funding, which I'll come on to. But just briefly, so some significant pressures coming through. Some of those we will have heard about in the month 7 item. Alongside that, we have, as you all know, an above average settlement from Welsh Government provisionally for next year, and I'll come on to that in a second. But at a bottom line, I guess we are continuing to support the priorities of the council, and we're looking to maintain and sustain those services that we do have, and specifically those as well set out in terms of the winter COVID-19 plan. So as I said, significant pressures coming on stream. They're pressures that we're well aware of. They're recurring pressures, and we've got an ageing population in the county. There's an increased demand on those core services, and expectations from residents are rightly high, and we are having to deal with inflationary and legislative changes. As I touched upon earlier in the month 7 item, we do need to ensure that the services and the offerings remain relevant and as efficient, as effective as possible, with an eye on those frontline services. And just briefly, we are making specific one-off use of reserves to support the budget this year, both in terms of capital receipts under the capitalisation direction, which is very much a one-off level of support. We have got it in the current budget this year as well, but it is a one-off piece of funding, and once it's gone, once it's used, it's no longer available. And we, like I say, we continue to challenge services to sustain themselves rather than see services close and not come back. So in terms of the funding for next year's budget, Cabinet have presided over a proposed increase in council tax of 4.95%. And in terms of viable options of funding alternatives, that is mainly made up of Welsh Government grant and of any reserve support, and our reserves, specifically are at very low levels comparatively across Wales, and certainly at the mid to lowering level of those which are recommended for authorities to hold. So a 4.95% increase in council tax, which is proposed, would mean a £1.31 increase per week on a Band D equivalent property. There's a few slides here in terms of showing our comparison, really, in terms of our proposed council tax levels and grant from Welsh Government across the levels for Wales. So just briefly here, we can see that Monmouthshire is kind of in the middle of the pack here, slightly above the All Wales average for Band D equivalent council tax. The following shows the two ends of the extreme, I guess, in so much that Monmouthshire has the greatest number of properties within the Band D to I range. So proportionally, Monmouthshire raises a greater amount of council tax from its residents than other authorities in Wales. And apologies there. In comparison to Blaenau Gwent, on the other side of the scale, which have the highest range within the A to D band of properties. So in terms of the core funding from Welsh Government, as I said, we've had a proposed increase just above average for Wales, which is pretty unheard of, I guess, for Monmouthshire. It's what it is, though, is still the lowest funded per head for authorities across Wales, and this means that we do have to raise, like I said, a greater proportion of our funding from council tax. It's certainly welcome that Welsh Government have seen the pressures that we're under, and they're their modelling has allowed for an above average increase for us, but still the settlement does not offset all of our pressures and inflationary impacts. Just briefly, we are still waiting for some notification of specific grant funding from Welsh Assembly, and we're certainly having dialogue with them to make some clarifications around this, because it potentially does give us some more flexibility as we run into the final budget proposals in March. As I said earlier, Monmouthshire does get the least funding per head of population in Wales, and this graph shows it. So it might be a little small on screen, but we are right at the far end on the right there in terms of being well below the average compared to the rest of Wales. So in terms of core funding, you can see there, as I mentioned, that the block of orange, which is the amount of council tax that we have to collect as a proportion of our overall funding, and it is the highest proportion across Wales, and we raise 34.4% of our funding from council tax compared to a Welsh average of just 23%. So that Welsh government settlement, even though it's more generous this year, it doesn't go towards fully meeting our pressures and funding requirements. And just briefly, in terms of putting those two things together, we can see that taking both Welsh Government settlement and council tax together, that per head we still fall below the Welsh average in terms of funding for the budget per head. So just briefly, the proposed budget that was presented in January recognises in full the pay and pension related spending pressures in schools, and it recognises certainly the demands placed on children's and adult social services this year and going into next year more than ever. Significantly, there's a response to the homeless situation, and a change in Welsh Government policy towards that, and ensuring that that situation is managed appropriately going forward. Like I said, we're conscious that frontline services would be struggling to make efficiency savings in the current circumstances, and we have limited fees and charges increases as much as possible, recognising the demands on residents at the current time. Chair, there's a couple of slides coming up which I'm not going to touch on in detail. They give a background to how the budget has worked through from where we started this year. I think the key point to note as we move through here is that we are, as I said, supporting the budget with 748,000 of council fund contribution. We were fortunate at the end of 2019-20 that we were able to generate some headroom in the council fund from a one-off windfall from a VAT receipt, and we're proposing to use some of that to support the budget and mitigate further rises in council tax or fees and charges or impacts on services. As I said, there's some background slides here in terms of how the overall budget is shaped. You'll have had the pack in your papers, or certainly it'll have been forwarded, so I'm not going to run through those in detail. So I will move on to the pressures coming through, and Dave will cover off the specific ones to this committee, but just at the headline level, I guess, those main pressures coming through. We've got £10.1 million worth of pressures included in the draft budget proposals. 1.47 million of those are to do with children with additional learning needs and those demand pressures there. Funding for children looked after, again, is showing a pressure of 1.46 million. And, we have quite significant pressures coming through for recycling and waste. I think it's important to mention that there's a consequential saving as well proposed for recycling and waste. So the net pressure is lower than the 1.44 million shown there. And as Dave has touched upon already, those pressures within the passenger transport unit, which I'm sure he'll come on to. As I mentioned, a significant pressure coming through for dealing with the homeless situation at the moment, and supporting that budget where necessary to ensure that the appropriate levels of support to given to the homeless within the county. And I think one key thing to mention for members in terms of the pay award pressure, what we have done is modelled a 1% increase in both teaching pay and non-teaching pay. The Chancellor has been clear that there's no funding coming through within core budgets for any pay award, and Welsh Government similarly have confirmed that. So any movement or increase above that 1% would be a significant pressure for the authority as we work up into the final budget proposals. I think it's worth pointing out that those decisions around pay awards are devolved for teachers to Wales, and there's an appropriate body who decides upon that, and similarly for the non-teaching staff, that's devolved to the appropriate body who presides over that. So we certainly have little control over that pressure coming through. In terms of savings, as I mentioned, they are fairly limited and probably fall into the category of savings which are resulting from decisions we've already taken in most respects. So, as I say, the four main areas are principally comprised of savings resulting from those decisions we've taken this year or in previous years. We are, as I said, bringing forward some support from the flexible use of capital receipts, and that is a specific use. It can only be used in areas of service reform, transformation, or where we're sharing services regionally across Wales. We are proposing some moderate increases in fees and charges, but looking to limit those where possible for the impact on residents. And we do have some additional specific grant funding, primarily in adult social care. So that just gives a list there of those main savings coming through, and I think I've covered most of those, but notably for this committee, that saving there for recycling and waste nets off the pressure we saw earlier of 1.44 million to come to a net pressure for that service. The final thing to mention, I guess, on the services, the savings, sorry, is just that we are looking at the way that services are delivered and those accommodation and mileage savings that we can look to take at the moment in terms of how our staff are working and those efficiencies that we can be making on accommodation and certainly travel costs. So a final few slides just on the impact of the budget proposals and the risks going forward. As I said, the proposed council tax increase of 4.95% and those moderate increases to fees and charges, there are mitigations to those, and as part of the budget papers, the performance team have produced an overall wellbeing and future generation assessment on the budget proposals, and I think it's important to note the mitigation is key within these. the council tax reduction scheme offers some mitigation to those low earners and those in receipt of benefits. And certainly on the adult social care side, there are caps and means tested mitigations in place. So just briefly moving on to the capital proposals. I think it's fair to say that we're maintaining the existing portfolio and maintaining the core programme and funding of capital. Certainly supporting the highways programme and property maintenance. Disabled facilities grants we're maintaining at 900,000 per year, and we're also maintaining the budget for access for all. And as I said, we are using a one-off use of capital receipts to meet the cost of service reform and support the revenue budget. What that does mean is that those receipts aren't then available in the future to invest in the capital programme. So it's important that we limit that investment in and mitigation of the revenue pressures as much as possible. There is a long list here of specific capital pressures and potential investments that currently sit outside the budget proposals, and we're certainly working behind the scenes to to look at these and I guess take into account the relevant pressures that they bring forward and how they stack up against the authorities' core commitments. So just finally, there are significant risks and uncertainties, which I guess is unsurprising given the circumstances we present the draft budget proposals in. There's continued pressures around the pandemic, and we are in dialogue with Welsh Government around their continued commitment to meet those increased costs and income losses that we're seeing. We're hopeful that support continues as we hopefully move into the recovery phase of the pandemic. But we need to keep those communication channels open and certainly apply the appropriate pressure to Welsh Government so that they recognise the pressures that we're under. As I said, probably the key risks for us now as we move into March and the final budget proposals are around the pay award, and also getting the clarification about the specific grants going forward. And just finally, looking ahead over the medium term, the Chancellor and Welsh Government have announced only a one-year settlement, and that does cause us specific issues going forward and modelling how our budget is going to look like over the medium term. So it's hard to look beyond next year, but certainly behind the scenes we have to model on what we expect to happen and how those services might look as we move forward. And certainly the uncertainties of setting the budget for 22-23 and the local government election on the horizon. So just finally, those key dates, I guess, for setting the final budget as we move past public consultation will be the Cabinet meeting on the 3rd of March, and then the Council meeting on the 11th of March, which is actually the final day that we can set our budget under current legislation. So Chair, I think that covers off the main points of the draft budget proposals. I know David Loaders just wants to cover off some specific slides relevant to this committee, if that's okay.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Chair. John, if you just keep the slides up, and we'll tab through them when needs be. Right, so this is the list that relates to Strong Communities portfolio. There is a detailed mandate behind each of these proposals, and there's a reference on the left-hand side for each mandate, which will help you identify, the mandate. So Strong Communities overall, we're proposing £2.822 million worth of pressures. That's 28% of the overall pressures of the authority. As you can see, a lot of these are repeated probably from the month 7 outturn, so we're recognising in-year overspends this year as a pressure going forward for next financial year's budget. So you see the top three relate to passenger transport. That equates to nigh on £917,000. The top one, they've estimated the effect on the budget from additional pupil numbers and catchment change consequences that have been incurred and haven't had additional budget to pay for, and also they're predicting what will happen next year. So that's quite a large overspend, but what that is doing is addressing the recurring overspend that we already have this year, and it's adding on to that the expected additional cost of additional pupils next financial year. The next one at 327, again, this is a consequence of overspends in previous years. They do have this recurring staff pressure, and we do have problems with the cost of contract handbacks. So when an operator hands back a contract, it does tend to cost more to get a new operator in to run that service or do it in-house. And then the last one is private hire. You mentioned at month 7 that private hire was a pressure. We foresee that going forward, particularly in the short to medium term, that our private hire income won't recover. So we're putting a request in for pressure to cover off that potential income loss. Moving on, we have 2 pressures for catering. The first one relates to an additional post. This relates to a post that we want to bring in to supervise the corporate catering function. So it's not just relevant to schools catering, it's corporately, it's across the authority, and that's to concentrate on procurement, dietary requirements, health and safety, etc. And this has sort of come around from an audit report that stated that there were deficiencies in this area across the authority, so we're looking to plug that gap. The 36,000, which relates to free school meals, we've seen our free school meal entitlement go up this year. Now, if that entitlement is taken up 100%, the entitlement hasn't gone up because there's more pupils moving into the authority. The entitlement has gone up because more pupils have qualified for free school meals. So what that does is take away the potential of a paid school meal, but we still have to provide the meal. So that's just to cover off the consequential shortfall in income that we expect from those free school meal increases. Transport, again, we reported transport were overspending at month 7. This £73,000 is to help cover the additional premises costs that they're incurring at the moment, but it's also to help bring in additional staff resource, which will help drive the transformation of the transport unit going forward. We have historically overspent on transport over the last couple of years, so we're looking to bring in an officer who will be able to transform the service, which will then generate efficiencies going forward. John mentioned waste. It's quite a large pressure on waste. That is made up of a number of areas. Let's just bring up, sorry. So yes, the pressure, the actual total pressure, although it is offset by savings, is made up of a number of things. You know, we've got increased pay awards of £75,000. We've got contract inflation costs of £150,000. We got a reduction of grant funding of £150,000. You know, we got the need for investment in new vehicles, of £100,000. And obviously the effect of the volatility of the recycling market, as you know, as a result of Brexit and COVID, etc., they're estimating that will hit us by around £600,000. So although that is a sizable pressure, it is offset by savings, which I'll discuss in a minute. Can you go to the next screen, please, John? So in resources, there are 4 requests for pressures there. IT, we've had notice from SRS that our contribution will increase by £99,000. I think the main area in that is licence increases that have gone up for next year. We've got a staffing pressure in HR and payroll, which is as a result of increased staff costs relating to system development and transformation of the HR service. We've got a training, an income pressure on our corporate training. You'll note in month 7 that we were reporting an overspend. Again, historically, over the years, the department have struggled to meet their external training budget, so we're requesting that we try and level out that pressure for next financial year. And then the last one we've got, again, this relates to HR and payroll. It's the continuing cost of the e-recruit and onboarding software, which hasn't got a budget at present. So yeah, so that was the pressures. So the savings, we mentioned about the waste, there are corresponding savings of £685,000. Again, that predominantly relates to the garden waste collection, where we've changed the service relating to garden waste. So there's a reduction in subsidy of £330,000. We're expecting a reduced cost of our HRWC management provision of £115,000. We're hoping that we're going to see the benefit of improved quality of recyclate through the implementation of the polypot bag, which might release £100,000 worth of savings. There's also a contractor change uplift from a project with of £30,000. So there are some savings coming alongside that pressure to help offset it. And then the last one, within ground maintenance, they're proposing to remove a sweeper, which will provide £65,000 worth of savings. So overall, strong communities, £750,000 savings. Fees and charges, there's a £64,000 increase in fees and charges across enterprise. Only £9,000 of that relates to strong communities, and that's predominantly in our highways and road safety area. And there's a breakdown there of how that's made up. There's a more detailed breakdown in Appendix 2 of the main report. And then capital, as John said, we're fully committing to the same level of capital as this year. Again, there's a long list of schemes there. In total, around £6.223 million worth of capital schemes. Majority of that is relates to highways and infrastructure. But there's also access for all, and you see the capitalisation directive requirement as well. So yeah, so that's a capital schemes relating to this area, and I think that is it, John. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I will now, unless Jonathan needs to come back in, I'll hand over to members if they have any questions. The Speak Now facility is now in the chat bar, so I'll give you a few moments.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for item?
I do.
Thank you, Councillor Bertrini.
You can tell I'm better, can't you? Got questions now. Back to being a pain. You love me, really.
No, I do.
Yeah, just on, can I comment on the two separate bits? So the first bit about the overall economic picture of the council. Appreciate the graphs, the per capita and council tax. Could that intro be off? Could it include basically? We talk about Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire, but you know, Blaenau Gwent and comparing Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire is a bit of a misnomer given the huge disparity in deprivation, and that chart is not there to highlight that. Yes, Blaenau Gwent gets a lot of money from the Welsh Government, but there is a particular reason for that. And I just think it'd be helpful for members across the board to understand why. It's not because we, you know, I'm assuming it's not everyone loves Blaenau Gwent particularly. It's just the levels of deprivation are quite acute there. And I think that's not acknowledged in that intro bit. And I think it should be to add balance. I wasn't entirely clear from that presentation, and it could be just my lack of understanding. What the Welsh Government was offsetting through its grants. I'll give you an example is homelessness, and I know there's new requirements from the Welsh Government, but I know they gave us extra money. Now, whether it was enough to cover the whole cost, I do not know. And I'm presuming the cost you're giving us about the homeless requirements is the over and above what the Welsh Government have given us. Could that be confirmed to me, or is that the overall cost and the Welsh Government are covering all of that? So I just a bit of clarification on that. Did I read it correctly that we're increasing fees and charges, but in line with inflation? Could you give me the precise figure then? I need to get up to date on my inflation figures, but could you give me, so is there an average? Are we going for an average, or is something particularly, are we increasing others particularly quite a lot? Some services getting charged higher, or in some services being lower? I just kind of a bigger picture on that, because it's important to know for our residents what sudden charges are going to hike up really quickly and which ones won't, just as being able to answer resident queries. That'd be really, really useful. The others probably don't relate to this committee, so I'll probably stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Petrini.
Thanks, Chair. I'll attempt to answer some of those. I think firstly, in terms of the settlement and how that plays through in comparison, you know, in some of those slides, you know, we are conscious that you know, our demographics in Monmouthshire are significantly different to some of the Welsh authorities. But you know, the funding formula itself looks, the Welsh Government funding formula itself looks to you know, to deal with all of those. But you know, we are aware as an authority that funding formula you know, doesn't benefit us in a lot of ways, and you know, we are looking to have dialogue with Welsh Government around reform of that. But you know, just to touch upon the proposed settlement for next year, you know, the two areas where we have benefit are comparatively, I guess, across Wales are from population numbers, pupil numbers, and also what's called equalisation of resource. So Welsh Government have gone some way into recognising that, you know, Monmouthshire has got the largest proportion of funding from council tax, and you know, that isn't you know, that isn't a fair situation, I guess, and you know, isn't sustainable for residents over the long term. So there is a recognition of that from Welsh Government. In terms of the homelessness grant and how that plays through in terms of the budget, Dave might want to support me on this, but as I said in the presentation, we're currently awaiting specific grant settlement figures. The pressure in the papers at the moment recognises that we haven't had that confirmation from Welsh Government, so the pressure that you're seeing there is kind of the gross pressure, and you know, doesn't recognise that further support that we expect to come through on homelessness and the housing grant. And just finally, on the fees and charges, there is a detailed breakdown of those within the budget papers. It's included in the appendix 2 to the link that you've got in the agenda. there isn't an overall increase across the board. They are specific to services, and sure Dave will, if he wants to, cover off those individual increases that are relevant to this committee. Dave, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the homelessness, I don't actually think it falls under this select committee. I thought it went to adult select, but I can discuss it anyway. Yes, the current pressure is £875,000. We have had information regarding additional grants for next financial year. One of that is an increase in the housing support grant of around £667,000. Now, we can't apportion a lot of this homelessness cost to that additional funding. That's been used up elsewhere. But Welsh Government have also released another £4 million across Wales to help deal with this homelessness issue. Housing officers have looked at it and they seem to think that we can move about £275,000 worth of that 875 against this funding. So basically, Welsh Government have agreed to fund the first 6 months of our homelessness costs via the Hardship Fund. So we've already had that confirmation. So that 875 has already come down to 600. That's all I know at the minute on housing. Regarding fees and charges, yeah, within enterprise, just looking at the actual fees and charges report, the average increase is 2.5%. So that's a little over current inflation. I think officers set their price increases based on, I suppose, what they think the market will afford. They obviously take into consideration, you know, the effect on the public, etc. But in general, across this select committee, I think the average increase is 2.5%. But the detail is in the appendix. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back just for clarity?
Of course.
Also, Councillor Murphy first. I'll wait.
Chair, I was just going to pick up on the comparison with Blaenau Gwent. That's not really there for members, although there is one member who constantly asks me where we're getting our council tax from. It's very, very useful in dealing with questions from the public. They get that comparison, and so it's there principally for the public consultation.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chair. If I can come back.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it's useful in terms of comparing it with other local authorities, but it doesn't. It sort of is presented in a way that says, well, look at what Blaenau get, and we get hardly anything. And I don't think it really emphasises, again, and I'm happy to say it again, the acute deprivation differences between Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire. And I know we have to fight Monmouthshire's corner, and I'm all for that, but I just think that's really misleading, and that's my personal view. On the charges, just so I'm clear, so as the budget is constructed, we're going to increase council tax by 4.95%, and as an average, we're going to increase charges, I think Mr. Loader hinted, which the market could handle. Presumably the market is our residents, of above inflation of 2.5%. So we've got a council tax of 4.95, and we've got increasing charges in certain areas, but on average 2.5%. Have I got that clear? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so for the services within this portfolio, yeah, if you look at the detailed mandate or the detailed appendix, which lists the fees and charges, there is an actual percentage increase against each one. Now, not all services have been increased. So across this portfolio, we're only expecting to pull in £10,000 more worth of income. But yes, you are correct. On average, it's 2.5% increase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back there, Dimitri, or are you happy with that?
Well, I'm not happy with the charges, Chair, but I'm happy with the answer.
Are you happy with the response?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next we've got County Councillor Linda Guppy.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for the offers for that presentation. I've got a lot of general questions because they all interlink anyway, and they all come back to this remit of this committee. First of all, talk about free school meals. We've seen a significant increase. I wonder sometimes if that was increased because actually we were paying families for free school meals, and I think really, you know, we're going to see more free school meals because I think employment is going to go up. We talk about COVID recovery. We're not there. We're not there yet, and we're not going to be there for a you know, a good 6 months. So, you know, we need to be talking about now and the effects in the next 6 months, and then about a recovery. But we do need to plan for it. I've just, sorry, I didn't see in the paper about free school meals any contingencies about holiday, feeding families in holidays and school, you know, the summer in particular. It might be in there, but I can't find it. So if you could just explain to me on that. Pressures with waste. We've got a lot of our environmental health staff doing extra jobs and sort of redeployment in view of helping with the track and trace, helping, you know, with the infection control and helping with the immunisations. But obviously we've got increased pressures within those areas, but where's our backfill and where's our money coming from that? It comes back with IT provisions. We've got extra IT provisions needed within the school. I know it's not children and young people's committees, but where's the money coming from that to help the schools with the learning, because this is going to go on for a while. What other things? Right, I can't see in the budget, and I say it every year, I just see that there's a deficit in the children and young people with regard to looked after children and general safeguarding issues, but there never seems to be enough money put in. We've identified that there are more looked after children. The way forward at the moment, we're going to get more of that, but and I'm sure it's been presented that children and young people, the authority are supporting a lot of looked after children remaining, they're looked after but remaining with their families. And I know that the additional budgets hit the roof, and I can't see any extra provision for that. The judges are saying leave them with the parents, but I do not see any additional budgets for this authority to help those families. Again, and I know the homelessness is not in our remit, but it's absolutely great that some of the businesses have stepped up and opened up their hotel rooms to help with the homeless pressures, and we've got a lot of domestic abuse, so that's really helped with that pressure. But what money's being funded to support that? You know, I get horrified that, you know, we've got a family that goes into hotel rooms, but these rooms are not set out to support the families. You know, lack of facilities, lack of cots for younger children, lack of smaller beds for younger children. So you might have a family that get a single bed and a double bed, but they've got toddlers. You know, we've got a health and safety issue with that. And then just to say with the recycling, seen a lot of fly tipping, and then the pressures on this authority where the workers have been, you know, put to work somewhere else really, and I can't see that put into this budget. Obviously they will come back into their normal roles, but not for a long time, so hence there's going to be a further pressure with that. And I think that's all really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guppy. Obviously, some of your questions don't really fall within the remit of those in finance, but Jonathan, on anything that you can provide a response to, please do.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor, for those comments and the questions. I'll cover off where I can. I know Dave will probably want to come in on some of the specific waste items and maybe IT, but in terms first off around the free school meals point and you know, that support and commitment through the summer. What we have got within our settlement from Welsh Government is it includes an amount for support for the free school meals. The further commitment to paying and supporting those free school meals through the holidays and through the summer period, that comes from a policy commitment from Welsh Government specifically, and we're getting funding from that via the Hardship Fund. So you know, the present circumstances are that, you know, we're continuing to make that those payments, and you know, meeting that Welsh Government policy commitment. So you know, that as we move forward into next year, we'll be continuing with our you know, existing provision of free school meals. You're quite correct, we are seeing an increase in numbers, and that's been reflected as we've gone through this this financial year. So you know, we certainly need to accommodate that pressure as we move forward. In terms of the children looked after question, and yeah, you're quite correct. We discussed this at CYP Select last week. I think it's important to note that there is provision within the draft budget for an additional 1.46 million for support for looked after children costs. So you know, that is going some way to meeting those commitments, and I know the service works closely with health in you know, ensuring that you know, we have early intervention where possible, and you know, and look to support that service. I think the other thing to note on that is that you know, as Councillor Murphy touched upon, you know, we're not looking to make staff efficiencies and applying a vacancy factor to that service in 2021-22. So you know, we're recognising that there is pressure in that area, and additional pressure specifically from the pandemic and you know, those resulting impacts on families. I think I'll probably hand over to Dave just to cover on some of those other points, maybe about waste, you know, IT provision in schools, and I think there were a couple of points around homelessness as well, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, John. Regarding first question, Councillor, on waste, I think that relates to our environmental health team. That doesn't fall within waste and street scene, that falls within our public protection alongside trading standards, etc. But you are right, a lot of that staff have been redeployed to the track and trace project. Those costs will be reclaimable via track and trace funding, which I think comes via the health board. I must admit I'm not up to speed on the IT provision for schools. I'll have to refer to Nikki Wellington on that and get back to you on that one. Our education finance officer. Homelessness. Yeah, again, we are putting provision into the budget for next year to cover off as much as the homelessness cost as we can. We are hoping that we will get further funding to offset that pressure. Regarding the suitability of the rooms, again, that's probably a question that needs to be directed to the housing officer rather than myself, so I won't be able to answer that, I'm afraid. Have I covered everything off?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, recycling, flight tipping as well, wasn't there? Yeah, again, with the recycling centres being closed, I imagine we will and have seen an increase in fly tipping. I'm assuming our teams are doing our utmost to keep on top of that. It probably will cost us more money to get rid of it, and it's just an unfortunate consequence, really, of the tips being closed. So yeah, I just recognise that COVID is having a very large impact, not just monetarily on services, but resources anyway. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Guppy, would you like to come back?
No, just to say that we do. Yeah, I thought it was our remit for public protection. We get annual reports from Dave Jones, and actually always an excellent report, and environmental health, is covered in that. And I know the environmental health officers are heavily involved in track and trace, and that's their job, and they've been brought into it. So, and there's such a small team. Sort of just one more comment. It's a general comment. We are strong communities, and there may be other things that need to be brought in that we need to be looking at this budget. We've already said there's a deficit in youth service. Well, we need to be thinking about the mental health of our community to make them strong communities. And I can't see much within this budget that is going forward for this year to support the mental health and well-being and make us having a strong community. I know it may cover adult and a lot of it adult and children, but if the budget presentation is a general overview and it's not being brought up, so and I know Phil will say, bring it forward, your suggestions. Well, I hope this presentation is not going to be the same one when it's presented to full council for resolution, because there needs more things added. Thank you.
Thank you. I think with regards to the officers that are in attendance today is what I meant. So some of your questions we can direct to the officers that it does fall under. But thank you for that, Councillor Guppy. Next is County Councillor Val Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Raised a question in my mind. Free school meals. Free school meals attract. If a child is not, there are children who are eligible for free school meals and they don't claim. If an uptake of a free school meal also entitles the school to some additional funding, and it raised the question in my mind, where does that additional funding come from? It's probably a question for Nikki, as you say. Does it come from our coffers, or is it additional monies that come from the Welsh government for a child that takes up free school meals, attracting additional funding?
I can come back on that, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you.
In terms of how the process works in terms of funding, the settlement for any one financial year from Welsh Government will include an amount based on the data that we submit. Just prior.
That's fine. That's answered my question. That's fine. Thank you very much. It was something I didn't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
And County Councillor Tony Easton next.
Thank you again, Chair. I'll start with the comments on free school meals. I'm aware that free school meals in a school that I'm connected with have increased by 50% in the last short period of time. So we're catching up with Blind and Grant quietly. That's just a comment. I don't expect any response to that, but I'd like some response to the contract handback. How will this, at the moment, with schools in a state of not being attended very well, how will this be? How will this affect the? I presume it's a lot to do with schools as well. Is the contract handback on servicing schools with taxis and things like that? Is there a provision in place? Do you expect us to have a problem? And if we get over that, can we get over that problem? The other question is regarding sweepers. A £65,000 saving on sweepers, and I'm speaking from memory. Haven't we got an arrangement in place with some of the community councils to part fund sweepers? And if I'm right, and if that's the case, how will that affect the arrangements that we might have? Councillor Murphy might be able to answer that one, because I think we've talked about this in the Sevenside area with Megan and the Roggett. I'm not sure whether it's actually in place, but if it is in place, how will it affect us? And a question I should have asked of the last thing: how many loans do we still have outstanding with the Welsh Government regarding street lighting? That's my 3 points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Oh, I think I'll let Phil come in first. Thanks.
Only to say that from what I recall, the offer that went out to town and community councils wasn't taken up much. 65,000 is the cost of the machine and its operator, so it isn't going to affect the service as far as I'm aware.
Can I come back on that one briefly, Chair?
Of course you can.
I am aware that Calicut Town Council have an arrangement with town centre sweeping, and that included the use of a sweeper item, I think. Could that be considered and looked at and get an answer back on that?
I think it's probably best to refer that one directly to Nigel Leeworthy, Tony, rather than do it through a budget process. Can you just ask him direct?
Yeah, will do. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions now?
Yeah, just the one about loans. How many loans have you got outstanding with the Welsh Government on street lighting? I should have asked earlier.
I can come in there, Chair. Yes, we have 4 loans outstanding at the moment. Each have got obviously different payment periods because some have been taken out earlier than others, but currently we have 4 loans. I think you did ask a question about the contract handbacks as well.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, it is a problem. You know, we get contract handbacks sometimes because an operator maybe goes out of business, or they feel that they can't run the service that they're providing on the contract that we've given them. You know, that the passive transport team do a very good job in managing that. They do get thrown curveballs quite regularly where operators drop out without much notice. The question regarding the risk going forward, there are risks, but as far as I know, I don't think our passive transport service have failed in getting something in place for passengers and children going back and forth for school. So they've always managed every problem that's been thrown at them. But yeah, it is a potential risk going forward that we won't be able to put a service on, but that hasn't been an issue in the past. Okay.
Okay, but going back to the other loans to the Welsh Government, can we have a breakdown of those actual loans for this committee? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, sure.
Linda
Thank you,
Guppy. Thank you, Tony. Linda Guppy, you have another question or wish to make a comment?
Yes, please. A general question regarding the council tax collection in view of redundancy, really. What's our state of play with collection of council tax this year due to the pandemic, and have we put in place any contingencies, really? Do we expect to collect as much for next year, the 21-22, please? And sort of one last question, playing devil's advocate here. put out the council tax to 4.95. Don't want to see it going up, but is it enough?
Thanks, Chair. I can come back on that one. In terms of the current year and collection of council tax, you know, early indications when the pandemic first broke, and you know, things you know, were really problematic. You know, there were indications that there were going to be problems, you know, in terms of council tax collection. But as the year has progressed, you know, we are getting back towards you know, our usual levels, and we're not foreseeing an overall issue in totality. Obviously, the total council tax collection usually takes quite a long time to manifest itself, so we probably won't know the final position on that for quite some time. But I think it's important to note as well that Welsh Government are supporting local authorities with some specific funding, which is on the horizon in February. We don't know how much that might be, but we should get an allocation to support us for any shortfalls that we will face. As we move into next year, you know, the signs, as I say, are that you know, our collection rates won't deteriorate, and we hopefully won't be affected in totality once we see the final position. So at present, you know, I think the summary is that you know, we're quite hopeful that that situation will remain quite constant. In terms of the secondary point around the proposed increase in council tax, I think you know, going back to that overall budget, we are supporting the budget this year, proposing to support it with reserve usage, and we're looking to, you know, to limit that impact on council taxpayers as much as we can, and you know, really committing to using that one-off use of reserves, which you know, is there for circumstances such as we're facing. But you know, certainly, and I'm sure Councillor Murphy might want to come in, but certainly as we move towards final budget now, you know, our commitment to that reserve usage as a use of funding, you know, will remain, and you know, we certainly would look to limit that impact on council taxpayers as much as we can.
Yeah, I can just add a bit to that, Chair. The whole point of putting the last year's surplus into reserves to be used in these circumstances was precisely that. Nobody likes to see council tax go up. I think 4.95 is about the absolute maximum that we would countenance under present circumstances. It is going to cause difficulty for some, which is why the reliefs are there. But no, I think that it certainly shouldn't be increased. It's better to use those one-off reserves rather than hit the public with more than we actually need to.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back in, Councillor Guppy?
No, thank you for that information, and allowing myself to ask a supplementary, and just to say that, can we advertise fully the relief in council tax for people, because some of the benefits, you know, if it's the first time you've had to receive benefits or apply for benefits, it's a minefield. So can we do our best to really increase, you know, make the communications to everybody, possibly in our council tax letter when it comes out? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. Are there any further questions now? No? Okay. So I'll sum up quickly. So item 4, revenue and capital monitoring 2020 and 2021 forecast outturn statement month 7. Councillor Guppy asked a question with regards to income lost on car parks, specifically Roggett Community Council, that shared car park, and will we be offering any funds to the Community Council? Dave confirmed he will come back to you on that, and she also asked are there any profits on solar panels, which he didn't have the details for, but he did confirm we're making a return. Councillor Val Smith asked for an update on where we are with the Capita Grant. Jonathan advised it's an ongoing situation and we're just in the final phase of this relationship. Councillor Petruni asked a question with regards to agency and consultancy costs and is this policy sustainable? Jonathan confirmed that he would come back to Councillor Petruni on costs. If that could come back to all members of this committee, that would be grateful. And it's not a long-term solution. With staff have diverted from frontline services, there haven't been resources available. And Councillor Petruni then asked if are we looking at a restructure of the teams because of the pressures. There is no specific restructure of teams as a result of the pressures, but we'd have to continue to monitor. County Councillor Tony Eason asked questions with regards to the 72,000 street lighting and asked if the role of the LED lights has been completed and the contract with the remote switching ended. I didn't actually know the answer to that. Sorry, Dave, are you able just to confirm what your response was to that? I do apologise.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Apologies, I didn't pick it up. As far as I'm aware, the contract was extended for this year. What I will do is contact the street lighting manager and update the committee on his response.
Thank you, Dave. That's very much appreciated. You also advised that we don't have to start paying back the loan till next year once you've completed the LED rollouts. You did say on there. Councillor Easton also asked if it will change the future of the budget. The answer is no, due to the loan that we are due to start paying back. Some street lights will have poor lighting. Are there any new plans to review the lighting? Obviously, that will need to go to Carl Tewig, the officer responsible for lighting. And you then asked a question, how long have we got to pay off the loans? Pay off the loan is 15 years, and you then asked a supplementary question later on and asked how many loans we have, and there's 4 loans, and we've asked for a breakdown of loans and terms. Councillor Petruni asked why we're comparing Bynor and Monmouthshire due to the disparity between the two councils due to the levels of deprivation. Jonathan did confirm that he is conscious of that our demographic is different to other local authorities, but the funding formula doesn't actually recognise the difference. The largest proportion of funding from council tax and Welsh Government recognise this. The reason we compare to other local authorities is it helps the public to understand the difference of what we get compared to other local authorities. You also asked a question with regards to Welsh Government offsetting through its grants for homelessness, and Jonathan confirmed that we're currently awaiting grant settlement figures that fall under adult, but that will come into the Adult Select Committee. And you also asked a question for a breakdown of the increase in fees and charges in line with inflation, which both officers confirmed that a full detailed breakdown is in the budget available in Appendix 2. You then asked for clarity on are we increasing council tax and charges by 2.5%, which the officers confirmed that not all services have been increased, but on average is a 2.5% increase taking place. Councillor Guppy asked questions with regards to free school meals. Which the officers confirmed we've seen an increase in the number of applicants for free school meals. Settlement from Welsh Government, and we will get a settlement from Welsh Government for that. The pressures with waste, environmental health staff are being redeployed to track and trace, and we've seen increased pressures. Where is the money coming from that? And these costs will be reclaimed back through track and trace. Additional budget help. With regards to looked after children, there is a provision of 1.46 million. Hotel costs and homelessness and domestic abuse. It has provisionally been put into the budget for next year to cover homelessness, and we hope to receive further funding from Welsh Government. Councillor Eason asked with regards to contract handbacks, which the officers confirmed can be problematic with operators handing back, and there has been a risk to services, but so far Transport have not failed to support the services. And with regards to the sweeper, they ask that you direct your question directly to Nigel Leeworthy. Councillor Guppy also asked with regards to council tax collections, do we expect to see as much next year coming in? Jonathan did advise that there were indications of issues with collecting council tax at the beginning of last year. However, things seem to be more consistent and settled down, so hopefully that will continue. But there are allocations from Welsh Government. So yeah, that are all. Is that all the questions? Yes, sorry, I merged 4 and 5 together, so I do apologise. Next is to confirm the minutes of the following meeting, so 12th of November 2020. Does anyone wish to have any comments with regards to those minutes? No? Okay. How about the 12th of January, the special meeting? No? And then I'll hand over to Hazel for the Strong Communities Forward Work Programme.
Just really for members to note that the original date in the diary, which was the 11th, has moved and it will now be on the 4th. So that will be your next meeting.
Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a quick question on the Forward programme?
Of course.
It was just to say, I know it's quite light and I know we're expecting confirmation of certain programmes. I noticed that one of them is social justice, which that's absolutely fine. But related to that, the anecdotal information we're hearing around, sorry, there was the dog just walking past me, about free school meals, about those spikes. Is there any way we could get a kind of briefing as a committee or paper around actual numbers, just so we kind of have an understanding of the effect on our communities and some of the families, as in fitting within the social justice remit? I don't know if it's out of scope, Chair, but I just wanted to ask.
Hazel, is that something we can do, or would that come under CYP? Because
I think technically, I suppose it's CYP, but I can see the link that Councillor Dimitri is sort of referring to. So we'll put that through as a request, and we'll see what answer we get from that. And it's not in your programme for March yet, but you recall that we cancelled a meeting just before Christmas and we deferred that whole agenda, and that would be the strategic equality plan, and it's also Welsh language and public toilets is due to come back to us, so hopefully we can get those to come to the meeting in March.
Okay, thank you very much. And the Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme?
That's for noting, Chair, unless anybody has any specific concerns.
And so the date of the next meeting, sorry Hazel, was that, did you say the 4th of March?
Yes, yeah.
Lovely. Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate it. I'll now call this meeting to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Well chaired.
Thank you very much.